I'm gonna drop kick Jim Lee with love, but you know. Happy New Comic Book Day, geeks, and welcome to issue 10 of the Script Heroes podcast,
where we bring you comic news, book reviews, and industry blues. My name is Joseph Jasonowski, and I'm the writer of Janitor Hero, Cunning Carly, and the Cryptoverse.
and I'm Katie Markham, scripter of the Rusty Robot Country Club and ghostwriter extraordinaire.
Our polls for this week are going to be Titans number 7, John Constantine Hellblazer Dead in America number 1, Arrowbone's Dust number 2, and finally Lotus Land number 3.
And in the back issue review, we're diving into Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1 by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley.
If you're interested in finding us on any of the social medias, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, all at the handle Script Heroes Pod. Or you can find my personal socials at JJAZ1111.
And I am on all socials at Katie Markham Pro.
And with that, let's move into the news. Okay, so our first bit of news this week is going to be a follow-up from last week. We've gotten a little bit more of an indication as to what will be going on with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles following the end with issue 150. So we were somewhat right in our predictions that it is going to be a relaunch of Volume 2 back to number 1, and they have revealed the writer of the series. It's going to be somebody who we have been recently exposed to. Jason Aaron will be writing the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series, starting with a one-shot in June, and then the full series will launch in July, coinciding with the 40th anniversary of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So
that is sick, because both of us reading Batman Offworld have been like, now I want to read more Jason Aaron. Yeah, and this is going to be a great place to read more Jason Aaron. He does such good action, and he seems really comfortable taking on these, established characters and really getting at their cores. So as a newer Turtles fan, I'm excited to use that as a place to kind of good faith jump in and feel like I'm going to be
also releasing,
taken care of.
I don't know exactly when they're coming up, but I know they're releasing, I think it's a 3-part, catch-up book, essentially, that's going to be, recapping what has happened across, the first 150 issues of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I don't know exactly when that's coming out, but that should be an easy way for you to bridge yourself into this new series. Yeah. But yeah, I'm quite excited for it. I think one of the few things we said that in the first issue, I should specify, about Jason Aaron that we were a little bit timid about is kind of the corniness of some of his dialogue. I think that'll feel pretty at home with the Ninja Turtles. So
with some cowabunga pizza eating turtles.
Yeah. So I think I'll be very excited to see kind of where he goes with it, especially the series has gotten to a very I guess developed point. We've gotten, I think, pretty far into a turtle story, much further than turtles typically make it. So they're in a little bit of an odd place for a relaunch. So I'll be interested to see if he strips away kind of some stuff to get us a little bit more back to basics, or what is going to happen there. But I think it's a good writer to kind of take on that challenge.
Clearly, it's just going to end up being Turtles prequel where they are in space fighting aliens. Because that's my point of reference for Jason Aaron.
Another Triceraton War? Going for it? Hell yeah. But I think that's going to about wrap us up on this news story. Let's move into our next one. Okay, so DC Comics has put out their free comic book day solicitations, and they have teased the launch of a major DC event. I'm gonna read you the exact solicitation right now.
Okay. I'm hesitant for their main. I'm gonna listen.
This is their literal solicitation for the main, DC Free Comic Book Day book. DC Major Event 2024 Free Comic Book Day Special Edition. The prelude to the biggest DC Comics event of 2024 is here. It's a story 30 years in the making, and in this special Free Comic Book Day tale, the final domino to fall and an epic scheme comes tumbling down, and the DC universe will never be the same. More details coming soon. They have put out a literal solicitation that just calls it Major DC Event.
Okay, but last year we had Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, and
that in this was more than a year ago now, I think. Was it not? I felt like that was 2022. Anyway.
Oh, it is 2024. Fair enough. Uh, the rolling of the year did not process with me. We're
Okay,
barely
okay.
Whatever. In any case,
I know, but this is the event for 2024.
no,
That's why that
is super fair. But fine. Even so, 2 years ago, we had Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was like a major shakeup with the Justice League not being the Justice League anymore, like disbanding.
Yeah.
What do they mean? This better just be them overhyping, because
It might be. I mean,
so
Bleeding Cool speculating that this is going to involve the whole Trinity of Evil thing they were teasing for 2024 earlier. I don't know how that would really work out. It's weird.
30 years in the making would be what, the mid 90s? I'm trying to think of what could have possibly popped up then.
How long has Amanda Waller been around? Is it longer? I guess she has to be around at the 90s is like the earliest, I think, or the latest she could have been introduced. But I don't know exactly when Amanda Waller was introduced. 90s could be right.
You know, I thought that the whole thing was Beast World was Amanda Waller's fault, but obviously, light spoilers for the poll list that's going to be coming, not spoilers for the books, but obviously there's something else greatly at play with Beast World. And so I suppose this could be her laying the foundation and then setting the scene for her to have, like, her big thing. But you can't change the DC universe again. You can't. It just
That's all they do. That's all they do.
And I need them to stop. It just happened.
It's gonna happen again. I don't know. It does say the DC universe will never do this, but that could be like the normal like and Batman will never be the same after this thing. Hopefully, it doesn't mean a physical universe change. I hope.
Because I will riot. I'm not gonna lie. I'll fully riot. I'm hoping that because it's Amanda Waller
rioting in the streets outside of DC headquarters. No,
I will
more universe changing events. No more universe changing events.
We can only hope that this doesn't just mess everything up, because I really enjoy where the DC universe is right now. The dawn of DC has been like very successful for me personally. Wait, was Dark Crisis 2023? No, Night Terrors was summer. But
yeah. When was Dark Crisis? We'll look this up. Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths 2022. It started in 2022. I don't know when it ended, but it started in 2022.
Because I associate Dawn of DC
April to December of 2022. It went literally to the very end of 2022.
Gotcha. Because we don't need to shake it up again, because we shook it up already. We shook it up. Let it settle before you shake it up again.
No, they're gonna shake it back. They're gonna shake it back.
Oh, that's literally the worst thing they could do. If they do this as a return to status quo,
that's what they're doing. 100% would put money on.
I'm gonna drop kick Jim Lee with love, but
Watch out, Jim Lee. Katie's coming for you.
Anyway, I think this is
you didn't like the 90s, but that's a little excessive.
No, I love Jim Lee. I think that he's one of the most talented artists working today. But doesn't he have some form of creative control right now?
Let's move on.
Straight up.
He's head of DC Comics.
That's what I'm saying.
Anyway, let's move into the poll list for the week.
Alrighty, so our polls for the week of January 17th are Titans, number 7, John Constantine, Hellblazer, Dead in America, number 1, Lotus Land, number 3, and Our Bones Dust, number 2. But that's not all we picked up this week. Jay, what did you grab?
I'm just going to start by kind of addressing the fact that Invasive got pushed back a week, and that is why that is not here, despite us teasing it last week. It will be here next week,
despite us
or whenever it comes out.
To talk about it last week, and it being pushed to this week, it has yet again been pushed. So hopefully next week.
Yeah. Whenever it actually comes out, we will talk about it.
Yeah.
But I also picked up Cobra Commander #1, Daredevil #5, Green Lantern War Journal #5, Nightwing 110, and Superman Lost #10. Katie, what else did you get?
I also grabbed Wonder Woman #5, Haunted House, A Love Story #2, Nightwing, whatever number. I think this is also the week that Batman Superman World's Finest came out. I get half my pulls for DC from a different shop that I visit like once a month, so I don't always know exactly what I've got, but those are in the making. But for the books that we're sharing a pull for, what would you like to discuss first?
Let's start at Titans. Go into Constantine, then go Lotus Land, and then let's finish off with Our Bones Dust #2. How do you feel about that?
That sounds wonderful to me. Let's jump into Titans #7. Titans #7. The battle for Tempest's soul rages on. Brother Eternity shows his true self as the Titans battle for their friend, with the hope of freeing him from the enigmatic cult leader's spell. Will exposing the Church of Eternity and their ulterior motives turn the tide of the war for Earth? Writer here is Tom Taylor, did Nightwing, Injustice, and of course Beast World. Artist is Travis Moore, who's also worked on Nightwing, Wonder Woman, and Fables. The colorist is Tamara Bonvillian, and the letterer is Wes Abbott. Jay, we had quite positive feelings about #6 in Titans, after having quite negative feelings about 1 through 5 of Titans. How do you feel about #7 of Titans?
Let me just start by saying I feel like that summary, which by the way we just grabbed off of the official
that's
summary,
the solicitation,
does not summarize the book well.
No,
I don't feel like any of that happened in this book. But
they did battle for their friend. That happened.
There we go. But they didn't expose the church in this issue, really. Like, that wasn't the focus of it.
No. And also, is part of the war for Earth that people are on Brother Eternity's side? Because I feel like there's a much more prevalent
that was kind of set up in Titans, but it didn't it didn't really, it's not been in Beast World. Anyway, I didn't love this issue.
Me either.
I thought it was fine-ish. I liked they tried to bring Cyborg more involved. Like, that was nice, but like the whole moment of him being like, I wasn't, or like Brother Eternity, whatever he is now, like, Starfire's, connection, whatever. He was like, the whole moment where he was like, I'm not here for Starfire. I'm here, and she was like, he's here for you. And I'm like, how do you know that? Why is he here for, like, none of that has been well built or set up or anything. Like, that felt random. Then Cyborg got kind of a cool moment where he like couldn't be, taken by it, but I thought that was undercut by basically another hero doing the same thing later on. I also thought that he over-explained it way too much. Like, it would have been a better scene if it's just like, I'm a robot, or I'm half robot. It doesn't work. It's like a whole page of him explaining every like bit of why it wouldn't work on him.
And here's the thing.
And then I think this is
yeah. To narrow in on that, I think that could have worked if we got more of like, I don't know, it's literally just him staring at the dude while he explains it. If we like cut to his interior, essentially, if we were inside of him watching the worm try to connect on all these places, and then had like that almost quote unquote battle on the page, it could have worked. If they had built the scene up to a more like dramatic conclusion, like if they faked us out thinking maybe he was going to be taken by it, it could have worked. But I think that it just speaks to the problem that I've been having with all of these Tom Taylor titles at the moment, where the threat just feels so easily dealt with so quickly. Nothing ever feels like something bad is ever going to actually happen. And that's just
and
such
that
a
was
bummer.
where I was going with my next big thing, which is that I feel like this is somehow, after we've complained about this book, the absolute worst example of beasting heroes feeling like it just does not matter. Like, I literally, in my notes, what the line that I have is, I think they made Dick transform just so they could put it on the cover.
I think
I was
so
like,
too.
it has no bearing
The
on
thing is,
anything in the book. It doesn't ever feel important or like it matters in the slightest. It's just Wally cracking jokes about the fact that he gets to be a fox. And it's like...
Yeah, like...
Am I supposed to care?
At least when they transformed Batman, Dick, like, had a little bit of a fight with him, and it's like, oh, this is kind of scary. This just... nothing happened with him. And I'm like, okay, this was one of the big cliffhangers at the end of the previous issue that it had me really excited to pick up this issue. It's like, anytime you see Nightwing or Robin turn on the Titans, I feel like you're set up for something really cool because, you know, it's this non-powered character who's supposed to use his intellect to take down his friends. Like, I love seeing Robin turn on the Titans. It's one of my favorite types of battle to see. And they did it here, and it had zero effect. They easily contained him, they easily fixed him, and it's like, come on. We get nothing?
Yeah. Everything that was kind of built up in the last issue feels just so easily addressed in this issue. Like, I don't think I was ever concerned for anything or anyone in this issue. It was like, okay, there's kind of some cool action, there's kind of some fun moments, but it's just, happening. And then, everything's fixed very quickly.
And I could be wrong about this, but I want to check with you to see if you remember, because a very important thing that happens in this issue relies on the fact that Dick and Barbara set up a trap. And I don't remember that being mentioned at all before.
I don't really remember.
I don't think it was mentioned in the previous issue. And I'm like, okay.
It might have, I don't remember. If it was,
sure,
it wasn't like
maybe if we had focused on them, like, laying this trap, and then, the beasts got in quickly and we don't know whether or not it's going to be able to go off, that would be really cool and tense. But instead, it's just everything is happening exactly as it needs to. Like, the Titans keep succeeding without any sort of meaningful failure happening, and it's making the entire book feel very low stakes.
The external conflict doesn't feel like it's legitimately threatening, and then the internal conflict, there is none. They're all best friends, always. So it just doesn't make for a very, like, stakes-heavy book, which is unfortunate.
Very much so. But are we ready to jump into ratings?
Yes. I gave this a 5 out of 10. It was fine. The art's good. Yeah, I would not give it a Polis rack at all.
Same. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I think part of that being because I really like the art. But yeah, it's nothing special, which is such a bummer when they are the team that is running so much of what's happening at DC right now with the Beast World event.
Yeah.
But are we ready to scoot over to John Constantine, Hellblazer, Dead in America?
Let's do it. John Constantine, Hellblazer, Dead in America. John Constantine has cheated death once again, but his heart's not beating. His body is decaying, and he, his friend Nat, and his son Noah are all on the run in America, wanted for murder. Naturally, it's all John's fault. It always is. But as it turns out, Dream himself needs John's help. Something terrible has taken root in America, and it's using the sand from Dream's pouch to impose its will. If John can put a stop to it, he might be able to parlay that favor into a chance to save all their lives. But he's going to need help from someone he's not spoken to in years. The writer is Cy Spurrier, Judge Dredd, X-Men, Hellblazer. The artist is Aaron Campbell, Green Hornet Year One, The Shadow, and also Hellblazer. The colorist is Jordi Belair, and the letterer is Adia Bedikar. I'll throw it to you to start, Katie. How did you like Constantine Dead in America?
I want to start by saying that this art is so good for Constantine. Like, this very kind of sketchy ink style, lots of, like, I don't know, lines that show weariness and stuff. It's got very moody coloring that I think works super well. Aesthetically, it's just
the coloring's amazing.
Yeah.
Some of the best
Aesthetically, it's just a great thing.
I do love this artist. I'm gonna make you read Green Hornet Year One at some point because I love that series so much, and
I happily will.
Phenomenal art by Aaron Campbell. So love the art in this. But anyway,
yeah, the story I didn't realize when because we pulled this as sort of a last minute sub for Invasive. I didn't realize that it was like the third volume of this team's work on Hellblazer, but I didn't feel terribly disoriented. There's a bit of a catch-up page where they fill you in on what happened. I didn't feel super disoriented by it. I didn't feel like I was missing out on a whole lot. It did intrigue me to go read the other ones. But yeah, I quite enjoyed this. I love the kind of gritty cross-country adventure.
Gotcha. Yeah, I quite enjoyed the art. I don't know if the story engaged me at any point. It's a lot of kind of we're here and we're talking, and then we're here and we're talking, and it felt like it was building a story, but I wasn't actually seeing the story play out. If that makes sense. I don't know if I'm super agree with that. But that was how I felt about it.
I think once he encounters Dream, I got much more on board. Pages. The Dream pages are so gorgeous.
From an artistic standpoint, it's great.
Yes. Once he encountered Dream and we kind of got that plot of, you need to go like find these grains of sand that you let out into the world, I became much more on board plot wise. That does mean that it's very front loaded with not plot. And I definitely could have used a couple more little magic moments. There was a really fun moment where they're like stopped on the road and Constantine like scrawls out a spell and smacks it on the back of the guy, and it's like a very cool and casual use of Constantine's magic and power that I really love to see. And I also really enjoyed the scene at the Fountain of Youth, not the real one, to be clear. I really liked the Girl Scout character who comes in and just emotionally snipes Constantine. She's like, this is what he's gonna do to you, Mr. Statue. And I'm just gonna cut through all that because we don't need to see it. I quite appreciated that. I think there were a lot of good moments in here, but I agree with you that it does front load itself with some not terribly interesting scenes.
Yeah, I thought it's one of those things where I feel like if like somebody explained the plot to me, I'd be like, man, that sounds so exciting and interesting, and then I read it and it doesn't really feel that way when I'm reading it. It's got a little bit of a weird pacing. The story sounds more interesting as like it's being told to me instead of like me really getting to engage with it or enjoy it. I didn't always love the dialogue. I felt like went through its ups and downs, but there were points where I really did not enjoy the dialogue. On the flip side, I do love Aaron Campbell's art so much, and I do want to just really put that out there. And amazing coloring. So I want to put that out there because that is what I absolutely love about this book, but the story didn't really grab me at all.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely one of those books where I'm like excited for the next issue, and maybe that is not a good sign for the issue that I just read.
Yeah.
Are we ready to hop into ratings?
Yeah. Do you want to start us off on this one? I think I said the last one, so
sure. So I gave this book a 7 out of 10. A lot of it is the art and the story that I think is coming. Again, there were some good isolated scenes, but altogether not, amazing. Excited to see where it's going though. How about you?
Yeah, I give it a 6 out of 10. That's my, that's where the art can take it to for me, because I like looking at the pages, but I don't know if I necessarily always enjoyed reading the pages. There's some cool stuff in it, some interesting moments and kind of bits and pieces, but I just think as a unit, when it all kind of came together, it didn't deliver something that I was overly enthused about, but I still thought it was solid enough. So 6 out of 10, not going to be a Polis wreck from me. How about
not for me either. But we'll see where it goes. Maybe it's one of those, like Lotus Land, where I didn't love the first issue, but I've really enjoyed it going forward.
I was the opposite of you on that, though. Let's move into Lotus Land.
Lotus Land, number 3. Benny is in dire, bloody straits, but superhuman help from someone with a shared past may be what he needs to make it out alive. As he gets wrapped up in a murder investigation and has to clear his name, he also visits some ruins of the past that will finally shed some light on the young girl from his visions. The writer here is Darcy Van Polgeest, Little Bird in Critical Role, Tales of Exandria. Chao Felipe is our artist who has worked on Nightwing, Superman, and Stranger Things. Colors are Patricio Del Peche, and the letters are Nate Picos of Blambot. Jay, this is number 3 in Lotus Land. How are you feeling?
Yes. This is such an odd series for me to pin down my thoughts on. I don't know if you feel similarly. Like, it's a series where I don't know if I always know how I feel about it. I did quite like the kind of extra light on like backstory we got here, and it kind of started putting some things together, so that was really nice. It's still a book where I guess I don't really know where the overarching plot is like angled, so I'm not really like, I don't really know what to be like enthusiastic about or what I'm supposed to be like hoping to happen. I think that's the main thing of like, I don't feel like there's a track for me to follow, which is, you know, something, but I really do like kind of what's actually happening on the page. You know, the art's really, really good. I think the captioning work is really good a lot of the time. I mean that from like the text in the captions, not the lettering's fine too, but I'm talking about like the actual written captions. And I really did like the backstory that was built up here. But yeah, it's an interesting book. I'm not sure that I love it, but I think it's good.
Yeah, I have just steadily liked it more and more as it's going on, personally. A lot of the stuff that I had been hesitant about in the first issue is stuff that has been built upon and made into things that are like cool or interesting as we've continued to move. I will say I was a little bummed with this issue not to have the like beautiful cityscapes and a lot of the kind of environmental world building that I've really liked from Felipe in the previous two. But I do think that a lot of that is because we get so much plot going on. We get a lot of information about the world through what's happening, including a part of the world that I had been a little iffy on with kind of, I think we can call it magic or superpowers or whatever they're angling for with that. I like that we're expanding more on that because we had a hint of it in the first issue with Benny doing something. And now it's becoming more concrete, more part of the world. And I'm really excited to see how that is going to continue to build up.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I think that's one of the more interesting things. I think it's I say this every time I talk about Lotus Land. I think it's an intriguing book. Like, it's that book that's just like, I do want to keep finding out more about this. And I think it's because, like, I think what it does so well is, like, the world building, both from a visual and now from a plot standpoint, too. Like, it's such an interesting world. So I do want to keep venturing deeper into it. And now getting kind of I don't know the character's name. I'm so sorry.
Benny!
The main character's backstory. Benny, yeah. Getting more of his backstory, like, that is, you know, really, really good for actually making me care more about him as a character and his connection to his ex-wife, I believe, is the, you know, relationship there.
Well, he calls her his wife.
It made me more invested. Yeah, but that's why I said I think that's the separate, whatever the hell it is, you know? Yeah.
But I think that the characters are actually really well done in this book in general. Like, I remember in the first issue, I was like, I like the softer side of Benny more than his kind of detective side, and that's been the side we've really leaned into. So I like to see that quite a bit.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Do you have anything else you want to hit on, or do you want to move into ratings?
I think I'm ready to move into ratings. I gave this book a 7.5. Which feels a little wrong considering I gave Constantine a 7. I might knock Constantine to a 6.5 as I like kind of mentally compare the two. But yeah, I like this more and more each time I read it, and I'm excited to see where it's going.
I give this a 6.5 out of 10. You know, like I said, I enjoyed it, but there's still like, I don't know if I feel like there's like this real build to something, to like a destination. Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll all come together at some point, and then retroactively I'll enjoy everything a lot more. But yeah, I enjoy it. Not quite going beyond that, but I do enjoy it, and I am interested to keep going. We're invested at this point. We're 30 issues in. We're doing Lotus Land, and we'll see where it goes. I'm not going to give issue 3 a Polis Rec. This really feels like a series where you have to begin at the beginning. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is a series where you should just pick up a newer issue, but I don't know how you felt about it.
No, definitely not a Polis Rec.
Yeah, so do you want to move to Our Bones Dust number 2?
Let's do it.
Our Bones Dust number 2. The AI being named Addis might just be in time to save the feral kid from the family of cannibals hunting it, but there is something else, something worse than cannibals. It is old and dangerous and insane. It's not a conflict everyone will survive. Our writer-artist on this book is Ben Stenback, done a lot of Hellboy universe books, as well as a series called Living with the Dead. The colorist is Dave Stewart, and the letterer is the one, the only Russ Wooten. So
I cannot get over how much I love the art in this book. The aesthetics of this book are so phenomenal. Like the art,
the dialogueless pages.
Yes, exactly. Like there are so many dialogueless pages, which I think is something that you get.
Pages.
Very bravely with writer artists who know that they can communicate what they're trying to say with their art. It's so gorgeous and rich and wonderful, and I really, really, really love when there is dialogue, the way that the characters are characterized, because there's so much world in them. I think that this is just such a well thought out and well crafted apocalypse book. I singing its praises.
I love apocalypse books so much, and this is such a good one. I really, really love this. I think this issue took some of the things I was more timid about in the first issue and actually blended them into the story well. Like I mentioned, the first book, I just was like, we have our AI story, and then we have our main story, and they're kind of just like, the AI is here to be like, hey, I'm here, so that you know that like this interesting angle on the story exists. But they didn't want to really involve him until this issue. Now that it's come together, and it's really exciting. It's really interesting. The visuals are just absolutely outstanding. It's one of the best illustrated books you'll ever read in your life. Like, it is on that level. There's so much visual world building, which is really fantastic. I love apocalypse books so much, which I've already said, but this is my kind of book in every way. And the last thing I want to touch on in my like little spiel about how much I love this book is the speaking patterns of characters, whether it be AI or the characters. Like so many of them are abnormal, but they're always maintained with consistency, and it makes you feel like this is a real world, and you buy into it and you enjoy it.
Yeah, there are just, so we have the AI, we have the kind of feral humans, and this book also introduces another AI, which is like a man-built AI, and it also speaks in its own distinct manner, and
which I love.
Right? They all are so well crafted to be just emblematic of what they represent. And it's just super, super strong in that sense. In this issue, we also get a really good amount of action, which was so rad to see, especially from, Addis is like made of spaghetti noodles, but seeing him in his little fight scenes was so good. There's so much alien about him, and so seeing the way that he moves and interacts was so good.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Great action, great combat, and it all leads into a great cliffhanger that I won't spoil for anybody who's not picked up this book yet, but really makes you want to read the next issue. It's just well put together on every level. Oh, yeah. I don't know if I have much, if anything, negative to say about this book. I honestly really love this book.
Yeah, I think that we were both
such a good comic book.
Right, we were both concerned about the separate stories happening in issue 1, and they really immediately blend together here, and not in the way that I was expecting to have them blend. And I'm like, yes, I'm truly fully on board for this now. I'm ready to rate if you're ready to rate.
Great. Yeah. Am I going first on this one, or you?
You
Who's
can
going
go
first
first.
on this one? I'm going first. Okay. I gave this, and now I'm debating after a conversation if I want to bump it up ever so slightly. Yeah, we're gonna say this is a 9 out of 10. I had it at an 8.5 out of 10. I'm moving it to a 9 out of 10 in my mind. I really really enjoyed this. And I'm gonna say something that I typically say about really good individual issues, which is true here. It gives you everything you need. You can jump in right here. I don't think it's going to be hard to find a copy of issue 1 as well,
No.
to get both. You should get both, but you can jump on issue 2 if you need to. This is a strong
Yes.
pull list rec for me.
I'm going to fully agree just across the board. 9 out of 10, pull list rec. Grab this book. It's so fun, so good. So excited to see
I
where
love
it
this book
goes.
so much. Yeah,
Me
no, good stuff
too.
all the way around. But do we want to scoot over into Ultimate Spider-Man in our back issue review?
I am so ready. Let's do it!
Alright, so this week we're going to be talking about Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1, that it's issues 1 through 7 of the original Ultimate Spider-Man run. Blurb for the story is: an outsider even amongst his own peers, high school student Peter Parker is a young man at the crossroads of destiny. Orphaned as a youth and raised by his Uncle Ben and Aunt May, Peter finds himself the target of a constant barrage of pranks perpetrated by school jock Flash Thompson and his burly bud nicknamed Kong. After Peter is bitten by an experimental spider from the laboratory of Osborn Industries, industrialist Norman Osborn takes a deadly interest in this development. Will Peter be able to avoid a violent case of corporate downsizing? When backed into a corner, will our hero learn that with great power there must also come great responsibility? We got a little long list of credits here, so I'm going to try to go through these fairly quickly. The writer is Brian Michael Bendis, most famous for Ultimate Spider-Man, but he's also done X-Men, Avengers, Daredevil, with Bill Jemas co-writing the story. Pencils are, of course, Mark Bagley, also most famous for his work on Spider-Man, but X-Men, Captain America, Trinity, a lot of comic books. The inkers on this book are Art Tiberton and Dan Panosian. The colorists are Steve Buccellato, color graphics, Mary Javins, June Chung, Transparency Digital, and Jung Choi. The letterers are Richard Starkings, Comic Craft, Troy Pettery, Wes Abbott, Albert Deschen, and Dave Sharp. Quite a number of colors and letters
quite
on this
the
book.
supporting cast.
So here's, I'm not even going to throw for your overall thoughts first, because this is something in particular I want to focus on. Did you feel the change in coloring and lettering throughout this book? Because I especially did on the coloring side. I don't know about you. The first 2 or 3 issues of art are much rougher for me than the back half of the book, and I think it comes down to the coloring and the way that it's rendered.
I can see that. I don't know that I took a huge notice of it. Like there certainly wasn't a stylistic shift that I noticed. Like it all felt within the same style.
I thought there was a
And
pretty heavy style departure after like issue 2. Like the first couple of, like I was literally wondering when I was reading, I was like, is this like the first time Bagley worked with digital art or something? I'm like, something just feels a little weird about like the way that it's rendered. And then whether it was issue 3 or issue 4, I can't remember. It shifted. I was like, okay, no, now I'm really enjoying the art, and the art really looks, a lot better, I think, at this point.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, I thought the
I
style
will say,
changed a
in
decent
general, Bagley's style is not my favorite. So that could certainly contribute to it, where anything that looked a little off, I'm just like, oh, well, this style isn't for me.
Very fair. But anyway, I want to start there. I'll throw it to you now for like a more overarching feelings on Ultimate Spider-Man 1 through 7.
Yeah, so we've mentioned that it's kind of a divisive book amongst fans.
Yeah.
So I think on the count of 3, we should just say yes or no as to whether or not we liked it.
Okay.
Because I want to see if we fall on the same side. Like, I don't know that's very black and white.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Let's do it.
All right.
On the count of 3. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, then we both say it. No go.
Well, I was going to go 3, 2, 1 and then say it. But,
Okay. 3, 2, 1. The no go, though. There's no, like,
correct. No go.
Trigger word. Okay.
All right. 3.
Wait.
2,
so yes is good and no is bad?
Yes.
Okay.
3, 2, one. No.
Yes.
That tracks. That tracks. Uh, so with that kind of out of the way,
Yeah.
it I know that it's like a very kind of landmark Spider-Man run, but it just I could not get over how much I disliked Peter throughout basically the entire thing until maybe the very last issue.
I feel like I've mentioned this before. I have very limited exposure to Peter Parker, but I've definitely said before, upon learning that like way back in the original like Spider-Man stories, Peter was kind of a jerk. I kind of came upon like I feel like Spider-Man would be so much more interesting if Peter was kind of a jerk, and then like Peter's kind of a jerk, and I'm like it's better. I don't know.
I
He's
so
a
don't think
teenager.
so.
It's better when he's kind of a jerk, and he has to kind of find his. Because literally, his entire origins kind of built around the fact that he's kind of a jerk. You know, like he lets this robber go, and that's how he learns that he needs to be responsible. That doesn't fit the Peter Parker character that I think we're given with like mainstream Marvel. You know, and like you can be like, well, because of that moment, he'll never do. It's like, yeah, but that's a pretty gross character departure from like one moment. I quite like the way that Peter fit into this, and my main thing that made me enjoy this, because I have my things that I don't love about this. I'm not like gonna sit here and tell you this is one of the best comic books I've ever read. It's not. And the other thing I'll say is I had read the first like 2 or 3 issues before and really disliked them. For whatever reason, going back through again, I didn't dislike them nearly as much as I did the first time. And I got more into it. But yeah, what I really think makes me enjoy this so much is I feel like they really operate well in the what they were given of like you get to do Spider-Man again, but because it now is an established brand, you don't have to do everything as quickly, and thus the origin takes like 5 issues.
Yeah.
You get way more time with Ben Parker, with May. I think the interactions with Ben and May and their whole family are such a highlight of the book to me, and it really made me feel more for Uncle Ben, for Peter losing Uncle Ben, and for that dynamic, and for how Uncle Ben kind of passed this responsibility on to Peter. So I think they do a really good job of being a hero origin, but an extended hero origin. I like the amount that we get with Peter, like being Spider-Man but not being Spider-Man. Like having the powers but not being Spider-Man.
I hear you. I think part of my problem was that a lot of the character interactions just didn't land for me. And I think that's because Peter was so unlikable. And like literally I know that it's the point of him that everyone hates him and bullies him and that it's just, the world is against him. But it's just so it feels like a very cheap kind of sympathy that I get for him, where like I'm not really feeling that bad for Peter. One, because it's an established property. I know that he's gonna, become Spider-Man and be cool, I guess. Two, he's a jerk about everything. So when something goes wrong and he says, "Why does this always happen to me?" I'm like, okay, being a little if you're feeling bad for yourself, I don't have to feel bad for you. Kind of like I don't remember what we were talking about, but kind of with that.
We were
and then
talking
three,
about like the Anyway,
then three. It's like at this point, every single thing that could suck for you sucks for you, and that just becomes tiresome. Like
that's fair.
Yeah, I just found Peter to be very.
I'm gonna push back a little. I feel like you're overhyping how unlikable. Like obviously for you it is whatever it is for you. I did not think Peter was that ridiculously unlikable. I thought he kind of. I actually really like. I felt like he felt. Well, let me preface it with this. I feel like a lot of the high schooly dialogue was very off at times, but also early 2000s. So, I was not in the high school in the early 2000s, so
me either.
Can't talk about that. But beyond that, I thought Peter was very realistic in the sense of like all high schoolers are kind of jerks, and he feels like that level of a jerk to me. Of like, oh yeah, no, he's kind of just a little bit of a dick because he has kind of a heliocentric or like selfish nature to him, the way that most high schoolers do. He felt much more like a high schooler, I feel like, than a lot of high school comic characters to me. I was like, yeah, he's kind of a little bit self-centered, a little bit all on himself, and I like that quite a bit. but I didn't dislike him nearly as much as you did. So my intent isn't to say you're wrong, but just that I did not take him away of being, because I said earlier that I like him being a jerk. I want to make it clear that I do not see him as like this absolutely awful, horrific human being. I was like, no, he's just kind of that like high school level.
I don't think he's a horrific human being, but I think he's decidedly not likable, at least for me as a reader. And I don't think that Uncle Ben or Aunt May were written with much kind of depth of character that made me like them particularly. Because I think a lot of...
push back a little bit on that. I felt like Ben had some good depth to him, and I enjoyed the interactions with the two of them a lot. They had I think they had the most natural dialogue, Aunt May and Uncle Ben. I liked a lot of their like jokes with each other, and they're kind of like, I felt like that family dynamic felt very natural and realistic to me.
It felt very flat to me. Like, it was a lot of, like, it felt very generic. Like, and so obviously written in the 90s or early 2000s.
I think it's literally 2000. If I'm not
literally
mistaken.
2000. There is, especially in the first like 2 or 3 issues when characters are being introduced, I was just rolling my eyes at the way that the women in the book were treated. Like, when you think of sexism in comic books, a lot of times you think of like scantily clad characters who are, you know, I don't know, stepping on characters' necks, and it's like this overly sexualized. But both Peter and Ben are so dismissive of May in a way that I'm like, okay, this feels a little crappy. Like, May doesn't get to be a character. Even Mary Jane, who's kind of given narrative favor, is often cut off by other characters and doesn't come in until the end. I felt like it was very disarming to me to see, and then on top of that, Peter treating her like a jerk. It's like, okay, this entire family dynamic is very much something that I would like to be left in the past. Like, it was very much oh, well, that'll keep her busy so we don't have to be pestered by our loving aunt and wife. Like, that bothered me a lot from the family dynamic side of things.
I will say Peter was very dismissive of it. Ben, you pointed out the one line in which I think you could say him being, you know, dismissive of May. I don't know if I saw another instance of it. Like, I didn't think
when
that there was
a when she brings up him having social anxiety, Ben is absolutely like, no, don't bother him. When she's like, oh, I want to go check on Peter, he goes, no, give him space. Like, it's a lot of...
Yeah, I don't know if those felt as dismissive, because those felt like normal kind of parent conversations where, like, one parent's like, no, we need to give him space, and the other one's more like, no, we need to be more involved. Because I didn't feel like that was him outright like dismissing her, but more just being like, no, I think, you know, like I agree with you in the first example of where like she was like, oh, that'll keep her busy for a while, because that was one where I had actively noted it. But yeah, the other ones felt more normal in terms of parental conversations, where it just felt like a parental disagreement, because it wasn't like he was like, no, you're stupid or go away or anything, you know. It felt much more just like,
it's worth noting
we should give him space or whatever. You know,
in every situation where they're dealing with Peter, Ben is framed as being in the right, which I would appreciate from like Uncle Ben is like this really important figure to Peter and he's about to die, but it felt like it was at the expense of May, at least to me, and it bothers me a lot
to see, like, as we get it, well, you know, whether or not we continue this, like, once May becomes the, like, you know, central parental figure, how it'll play out. I don't know if I agree that Ben was like always framed as correct in their district, because I don't know if either one of them was ever really framed as correct in those. Ben was very much framed as correct when he was like directly talking to Peter, but in like, I think there are moments of like, should we give him space or not? It felt more like, I don't know if I agree that Ben was correctly, because like clearly Peter was, you know, going through some awful shit and like having great issues, where I actually found myself agreeing with May and in some of those moments. So I don't know if the book was necessarily telling us that Ben
That's fair. I mean, correct. More in the situation, like they never go and check on him. Ben's word is always like what they do. And that's kind of what I mean, I
think there's something to say there with like taking the, when there's this group, like the passive route just being what happens, like hers was usually the active route. So it's much easier to like in a disagreement have the passive route taken. Anyway, I mean, I didn't feel like it was overly dismissive of Aunt May. I do agree with you with Mary Jane's role in the book being very odd to me, because she's kind of just there for a lot.
Like, she doesn't have a personality.
Yeah, there's a reason I decided to take on the Aunt May one first, because I felt like there's more nuance to that conversation. I don't feel like there's much nuance to the Mary Jane conversation. You're very much correct that she's kind of just there, and Peter's a jerk. Like, that is very much how that.
And every once in a while, someone will make a comment like, "Oh, I thought you two were dating." I'm like, "Why would you think that? He has been nothing but a jerk really to her."
Yeah, and that felt more like they were talking like to the audience. You know, a lot of time of like, yes, you know, Peter and Mary are supposed to be together, but no, they're not together. Like, there was nothing in the book that it feels like, outside of the fact that they were like old friends, you know, that would indicate that they were you know,
like, she didn't even choose to hang out with him at first until Ben called her over.
Yeah.
And I don't know, she was a real low point for me. And that combined with the May of it all, and then also just my final point on the sexism thing that I am fine to move on from it. Every single time a female character showed up, I think pretty unambiguously, they were treated like crap. Naturally, part of that is because a lot of the kind of one-off female characters we saw were...
I'm trying to think of, outside of the one that like flirted with Peter, what other like... Oh, the Oscorp ones. Okay.
Yeah, Oscorp had 2 or 3...
I was like thinking around Peter, and I was like, I'm trying to think of any other female character that he really interacts with.
No, Peter's was the big one. And obviously Osborn was treating every employee like crap, but it was often like an off-screen just throwing a female name on there, and I'm like, okay, like, fine, whatever. But it's one of those things where it's the little cuts that then keep opening up.
Yeah, what I will say about like where you went, like the Mary Jane being a low point, it's hard for something to be a low point of a book for me when they're not in it much, and that's why it's just like if she was constantly there, it probably would have bothered me more, but because she's such a nothing burger in the character, which in the book, which is a downside, but it doesn't like overwhelm it in a story sense. Like it's something that think if I was reading it at the time, I'd be like, come on, what, put Mary Jane in the book, or put Gwen Stacy in the book, or what are you doing? But like reading back, and I'm like, well, it's not actually in the book, so it's not, you know, as much of an overarching detractor from it. I want to pivot to a side character that I really enjoyed, at least up until the final issue. And I'm interested how you felt. I really liked Harry in this. I really liked his dynamic with Peter in this. I thought it was a very interesting way to take their relationship, and I really, really enjoyed Harry.
Yeah, I was chatting with one of my friends the other day about Spider-Man auxiliary characters. Shout out Clark. And they described Harry as just a weird little guy who adopted this other weird little guy. Like, I like that Harry quite a bit, and I like that Harry was like clearly popular here. Like, he was on the basketball team, nobody was beating him up or anything, but he also wasn't like hanging out with people, and he clearly didn't have any sort of real social pressure over Flash and Kong. I thought he was.
He also wasn't really willing to use any if he did. Like, he was very much just like.
He did say later, I think it was at the party, that he has always been telling them to leave Peter alone.
Oh man, the only bit I remember at the party was Kong at the party, and then I was like, oh man, I'm kind of liking Kong, and then as soon as Peter left the basketball team, I was like, aw, damn it, I really liked Kong kind of like going at Flash. It's an interesting Flash. I felt like Flash was also kind of a nothing burger of a character. Like, I felt he was the other end of the spectrum, where he was just generic bully who says these lines that maybe made sense in the 2000s, but especially now are just like, these are weird insults and stuff. So I enjoyed Kong and Harry a lot more in terms of the side characters than Mary and Flash, which is a little bit weird, because Mary and Flash, I think, are like two of the biggest Peter Parker side characters. I was just like, they're so one note and flat in this book and barely in it, that it's just like that's a little disappointing.
It was a little disappointing for sure. To go to one more negative before I talk about the things that I really enjoyed with this book, I am really not a fan of Bagley's art. I think that he makes...
I really like it. Once the partnerships.
I think that he makes everyone look a little gross. Like, I hate the way that everyone's hair looks. I think it makes them look weird, and I really dislike his paneling choices for the most part. Like he
really
does
like
so many just like close up angled shots of someone's eye, and I'm like, you're trying to convey emotion to me here, but I cannot see emotion because
I
it's
really
a
like his action
eye.
sequences. He has like cool panel breaks and stuff. But what I'll say about Bagley, and maybe this was revealed a little bit last week when I don't know if I showed it actually on the stream, but I showed it to you, my Ultimate Spider-Man issue. I got the Bagley variant because I really like the way that Bagley draws Spider-Man. I really like his like thin, actually like high school looking, but also kind of like spidery Spider-Man. I even like really enjoyed the suit when it had no lines and anything on it. Like it was such a plain flat suit, and I thought Bagley made it look very interesting visually, but the way that he moves Peter when he's Spider-Man. So I really enjoy Bagley's art.
Transition for me, because I was going to kind of transition from that, is that I really don't like Bagley's art specifically in his like just humans going about their lives, but my big positive for the book is kind of a funny mirror to my positive from Ultimate Spider-Man #1 that we read last week. Is once we get our Spider-Man stuff happening, then I am so much more thrilled. Like, I think that the art looks much better in action than it does in kind of, I don't know, normal life. I think that Peter is really, like, funny and chirpy under the mask. Like, once he starts doing his little
I'm going to slightly disagree with that. I think it's the first time that he really does it against like Green Goblin when we get there. I literally wrote like, this feels like the idea of if I throw out enough quips, one of them will be funny. Like I felt like it was just trying so hard with like 10 quips per page, and it felt so out of nowhere for like the Peter who we had kind of been building. I was like,
and see, that's really again the thing is that I didn't like that other Peter. I didn't like that other Peter, and I think that the constant quipping, it works for me. Like, obviously, I don't think that every line he says is funny, but I think overall, he has a much funnier personality.
He even started quipping in captions, which was wild to me. Which the thing I think I hated most about this book were the captions. There were very little. Then issue 4 was covered in captions, and I was like, what is happening? I was like, what happened to the book? Like, I did not like issue 4 at all. Despite issue 4, I think being where the coloring change happened to make me enjoy the art so much more, it was the low point of the book for me, because I just went like, well, this looks better, but it's all the art's covered in captions of Peter's internal monologue. And then we get a little bit in issue 7 where it's like him quipping in his internal monologue. Like, what is this?
Yeah, I was like, it's no surprised that I didn't like the captions, since I didn't like Peter's personality. So that's just more of that directly injected. But yeah, I think that when he was under the mask, once he kind of, had his character turn with Uncle Ben's death, he became much more likable. And it started to work for me a lot more on just every front.
No, that's super. I don't love the way that he draws like the team faces, and that's why like the coloring shift was such a big thing for me, because with that initial coloring, the rendering, like I actually dislike looking at the art most of the time. Like it just felt so, like you said, like that grimy feel. But then once the coloring shifted, and the coloring I think became a little bit more, I guess, like less realism and more like comic booky in terms of coloring. Maybe that's a horrible way to describe it, but it's the best way I can put it into words in my mind. Once that shift, and it wasn't even just one color. I do think, let me find her name, because I think her coloring was the best, and I want to give her a little bit of a shout out here. June Chung's coloring. The issues that she colored, I think, were the best. But as soon as it leaves, and no shade, but as soon as it leaves Steve Buccellato's coloring for the first like 2 issues or whatever it is, I think it's a major positive across all the other colors that were done. But
yeah, that could also be part of my perception of, I liked the art better later once he like started doing more Spider-Man stuff. So that definitely could be attributed to the colorist as well, and I just didn't notice.
Yeah, but I wanted to give that little, shout out to the colors who we really like, and just stating the colors who their style doesn't personally fit with me. But yeah, overall, I think the main thing that really worked for me here was the slow built origin. I really enjoyed that. I do want to talk a little bit about Green Goblin's design, because I know you're going to hate it.
I didn't hate it.
Oh, okay. But I want to throw out my thoughts on it first.
Go for it.
Which is, I loved it when he had the cloak on. When he was just this hulking brute with the cloak. I was like, this is a top tier Green Goblin design. The way that they did the serum and now him being like monstrous, so he knows Peter's identity, but he also can't really reveal it because he's like this monster. So good. I also love the addition of Norman Osborn knowing like from the beginning and following Peter and like trying to. I love that whole dynamic. It was one of my favorite insertions here into this story. But yeah, I wrote, Green Goblin design feels straight out of the 90s and I love it. And then he took off the cloak and I went, I love it a lot less now, but I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Yeah.
No, full agree. I think that a lot of times 90s aesthetics work for me for villains because they're kind of like supposed to be over the top. Like, they're villains. They get to be a little campier for me because they're not on every single page. But yeah, once he lost that cloak, I'm like, okay, he just looks weird. Like, he just looks weird.
No, I agree. I want to give just the one thing I want to say, because you mentioned like the kind of the way that like it works in the 90s style working better villains. I think that's why I love the way that Bagley draws Spider-Man so well, like compared with like this Green Goblin, is we have then this like small kind of like insect-like or arachnid-like Peter fighting this giant hulking beast, and it works so well for the action sequences and the way
really
they
does.
Interact, and I love it so much.
Yeah, that's probably going to draw us to a close on our back issue here. Do you want to share your rating for Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1?
And then we're going to have to stick it on our top 10 lists.
Yes, onto our lists.
Yeah. So here's what hurts it to some extent, but I'm actually going to compare it with the thing that I have right above it because it feels very similar to me. But I like the one above it a decent amount more just from like the overall writing standpoint. I'm going to say something very similar to what I said about Radiant Black for this, is that this does not feel like they reinvented the wheel at all, but it feels like a really good wheel to me. Like, this is that superhero kind of weekly book or monthly book rather that kind of has its own story but also carries together. I really enjoyed it. It's also similar in terms of Savage Dragon, where I really enjoy the art, but some of the story doesn't quite always hit. So I did stick it on my list right between them. I gave this a 7 out of 10, which is actually the same rating that I gave Savage Dragon, but I'll put it above Savage Dragon on the list. So my list is now number 1, Nocterra. Actually, let me give you rate it, and then we'll do both of our lists. I got ahead of myself there.
I think I'm going to just give it a flat 6. Like, it's better than average, I think, because of that back half for me. Like, anytime we get the Spider-Man action, I think it really, really strengthens it. But the way that Peter is characterized at first, and then everything else we talked about, I was a little bit negative this episode, unfortunately. It's going to land on a 6 for me. So what is your full top 10 list?
Nocterra Volume 1 at number 1. I'm not going to give the ratings for each one. You can get the order. That's a pain in the ass to do. Number 2 is Batman and Robin Volume 1. Number 3 is Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. Number 4 is Radiant Black Volume 1. Number 5 is Ultimate Spider-Man. Number 6 is Savage Dragon Baptism of Fire. Number 7 is Chicken Devil Volume 1. Number 8 is Percy Jackson the Lightning Thief adaptation. And number 9 is Paper Girls, unfortunately.
That's all right. So my top 10 list, I like that we have the first two, we have the same top 2. I think it really speaks to why we became friends.
I mean, it is.
It literally is.
Scott Snyder, Dick Grayson, like all of that.
So number 1 is Nocterra, Full Throttle Dark. Number 2 is Batman and Robin Volume 1. Number 3 is Chicken Devil, Under Pressure. Number 4, Radiant Black is... No. Number 4, tied for number 4. That's what threw me off. Is Radiant Black, Not So Secret Origin, and Paper Girls Volume 1. Number 6 is Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. Number 7 is I'm going to slot in Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1. So that means that number 8 is Savage Dragon, Baptism of Fire. And number 9 for me is also going to be Percy Jackson, the Lightning Thief.
Not also, but yeah,
Didn't you have it on the...
No, I think I had it number 8, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I have Chicken Devil. I have Paper Girls at number 9, which is why I apologize to you, because I know how much you love Paper Girls.
I blocked it out immediately.
Yeah, as is completely valid for you to do. But yeah, I don't know. I think that was a great conversation on Ultimate Spider-Man. I think we hit basically on why it's a divisive book. Like all the pros of it, all the negatives of it. It's a wild book to read. It is something that I would read for yourself if you're interested in kind of picking up a Spider-Man story. I think it's an easy thing to read. You don't need any context, and then you can decide for yourself how you feel, and you can come back and yell at either me or Katie, whichever one you disagree with. But do we want to move into the creator corner?
Absolutely. And here we are in the creator corner, where we sit back, relax.
I want you to respond to me as soon as you hear the next word I'm going to say.
Those industry blues that we bring up at the top of every episode
we'll
yet to actually talk about.
You understand?
Kind of. I guess we have a bit.
I wanted to do a dumb creator spotlight, a dumb client spotlight at some point, but Katie is not.
It just feels so mean. But they are dumb. So many of them. If you're listening, not you.
If we've worked with you multiple times, almost certainly not you.
But yeah, this week, kind of tying into what we talked about with Spider-Man, and the shift that we noticed as we went forward. It was more to do with coloring than art itself. But this week, I'd love to talk about working with artists on a project. You've written a script.
So many right now.
Sorry, what?
I said I'm working with so many right now.
I know, right? It's thematic. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that we started off doing was freelance stuff where someone pays us to write a script. We send them the script, and that's all she wrote.
That's it. That's the extent. Yeah.
Yeah. But we've both also worked with people who want to work more closely with the kind of artist-writer team, so we can go back and forth and discuss things like that. So I would love for just to talk a bit about like what goes into actually working with an artist who has your script.
Man, it's such a hard thing to pick because like every single artist-writer relationship is going to be completely different.
Of course.
There's artists who, and then like there's the difference of, are you hiring the artist? Is somebody else hiring both of you? Are you working on something that you co-own? All of those are different dynamics to how things work. There's artists who are more involved in the like initial creative process, because every artist is heavily involved in the creative process because they end up, putting it to the page. But there's ones who are more heavily involved, like in an earlier sense of like, hey, I like drawing this stuff, or hey, I think maybe we should involve this character more because I like drawing them, or maybe you do character sketches before and you go back and forth on that. So there's different levels of working with artists. The main thing I think is being very communicating up front about how you both kind of want to handle things. If you're hiring the artist, if it's that kind of a project, you're obviously going to have a little bit more say in that, because you're the one paying them. If you are co-owning something or co-creating something, that you are going to, kind of both have an equal hand in. This is very common for anthology work or anything like that. So somebody will maybe be paying both of you for what you're doing. That's going to be much more, kind of upfront with them and back and forth. And like, what do you want to do? What kind of book do you want to do? That kind of stuff. So a lot of it's kind of figuring out the dynamic up front. And then I'll throw in one last little thing because it's something that not enough people consider when working with artists. A lot of the artists in comic books right now do not speak English as their first language, and some don't speak English at all. And that is something to keep in mind. If we were starting a partnership, what language do they speak? And if it's not English, how are you going to work through that dynamic? Because it can be, even if English is just their second language, there can be some level of difficulty in that. And that's something to figure out the best way to move forward.
Yeah, I can imagine it being especially rough. Like, you are trying to write down what is in your brain, and then if they're trying to interpret with extra obstacles what you're trying to get down, and then it processes through their brain, there's a real game of telephone happening there, and having as few people as possible on the telephone is definitely a boon. That's why it's a little frustrating. I've had a couple of clients who have adored, who have, started working on a project, they're talking to the artist, and then the artist is telling them something about my script, which means they have to tell me about what the artist told them, and then I'll tell them, and they'll tell the art, and there's just a little too much back and forth. They're so much better if you can be the one in communication with your artist. There's one client I have who is actually an artist who hired me to write his script, and it is so much fun working with him, because I'll send him, an excerpt, and he'll be like, "Oh, this is rad, this is rad. But also, what if we did this instead?" And I'm like, "Oh, I love doing that instead. Let's do that instead." And there have been a couple of hiccups where it's like, I don't know that I can fit all of this on one page, because he does gorgeous art, but he does a lot of kind of big panels, so sometimes when I script a bit too much for the page, it's a little too much for him to fit on there. And being able to kind of in real time bounce back and forth and figure out what needs to be on the page, that is such, like, it's fertilizer for your brain. It really helps you in that creative process.
Fully agree. And like what I also put that is like the upside is, when you're working with an artist, a lot of times they'll send you kind of things along the way, thumbnails or page, and that's not always, depending on the dynamic, something like, yes, you need to make comments change, but it is something of like, oh man, there's a glaring omission that would really fuck up the book, because sometimes that happens. Sometimes, the artist has probably read the whole script, but maybe they forgot that this thing comes back later on. And I'll give you an example, because I don't think it's that heavily of a spoiler. For one of my personal creator-owned books, there's a lighter that a character buys that kind of ends up being somewhat important to the climax of said issue. The artist drew the page without the character purchasing the lighter, because it was kind of an extra panel. It didn't seem super necessary, but they had forgotten that it comes back, and it does end up being necessary. So when I got the, very easy thumbnail, well, easy, it's art, it's not right, but like comparatively to drawing a whole page, like the rough sketch thumbnails, it was much easier for me then to tell the artist of, hey, can you fit this in because it's really important at that stage, rather than if I was working with a client or something, you get back a finished book and you're like, dude, this is, and actually I have a story in that too. I did a book called Spooky's the Haunted House. You can look it up. I don't really care. Those people ghosted me and never credited me, so screw them. I did that book. They sent it to me once it was fully done, only to realize that there was an interaction between characters in which, I don't know whether it was the artist, what happened. There are like 2 panels missing in which like the resolution of the like verbal conflict happens. So like a question is kind of like asked or whatever, and then we just move to the next page without it being resolved. And it feels so weird in the book. And I'm like, this is why you have everybody involved at earlier stages, because stuff like this happens, and then, you have issues. So yeah, the more directly you can work with them, and like there's a difference between working directly and micromanaging, like
for sure.
Is a level of take a step back, and always like decide what matters and what doesn't matter. Like sitting there and being like, well, I kind of wanted this to look a little bit different is a lot different than like, this needs to occur because otherwise the book doesn't work. Different levels of where you step in and where you don't step in,
Oh, certainly. To shout out Clark again, my Spider-Man contact. They're currently drawing a script that I submitted to an anthology that was rejected. But I love the script so much. I'm like, no, I need this to happen, please. So they're actually drawing that for me, and we were hanging out, and they don't have a ton of like comic drawing experience. So they're like, oh, maybe we could work together on like the paneling stuff. I'm like, absolutely. I love doing that. My favorite thing in the world is giving too much information. And so we were sitting on the couch, and like I was sketching out a page, essentially, and I'm like, this is where I think this could be, this is what I think this framing should be. And
the OG Robert Kirkman method.
There you go. And then they would take it, and they're like, okay, I see what you're doing here. I'll keep the general structure, but here's like how to make it look so much better. Like, this is so great. I love working with people who like have artistic vision, because I am not the greatest artist in the world, and also
pretty competent artist though, especially comparatively to me who can't draw anything.
Hey, don't attack. What were they, marshmallows?
Yes, they were marshmallows.
They were marshmallows, and they were very expressive. But yeah, I don't think that's not a skill that I practice very often. So it's much more like the kind of osmosis of engaging with a lot of it. But then having Clark look at the page and be like, okay, I see what you're doing here. Here's how to make it better. It's just such a great dynamic to kind of go back and forth, just to be literally passing the pages back and forth, be like, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? So as close as you can work with your artist, get there, because it's so rewarding and so much better for the story.
Fully agreed. It's good to have people who are more, collaborative. They're excited about it, so they'll be kind of bouncing off of you, and that direct relationship is great. I'm working with an artist right now. This is going to be the second time I'm working with them. I worked on a project with them for an anthology that we got accepted to. Actually, it's coming out probably this year, hopefully this year,
which I'm so excited for because I love that story.
Yeah, one of the most fun things was kind of a lot of the character design ideas that were thrown back at me by the artist. Name's Pico. Quick
shout out Pico.
There. And like I had this vision of the way I wanted this character to look, and then Pico came back and went, because of the, and I'm not going to get into it because the story's going to come out, and this is something you'll be able to read. But he's like, this is what makes sense, and it kind of clicked for me, and I was like, oh, you're right. This is so much better if we change the character design to kind of be like this. And so there's things that artists can realize that kind of breed the writing and the story into the art. And when you have a really great artist and you can go back and forth on stuff like that, it can just make the final product so much better.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even earlier this week, we were talking about Arbone's Dust, and you can't get closer to your artist than being your artist. And anytime you see a writer-artist working, you really see all the different ways that the art can communicate as writing, and your artist can pull that off because that's what they do, and they're so talented and cool.
He's like, that's the converse thing to writer art is of, like, you also can pinpoint those themes that have happened in like throughout comic book history, and you're like, when these perfect parts meet, like there's just magic being made. Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams is the team that's coming to my mind. It's just like everything is perfect when these two work together, because they clearly just know how to work together. That's
beautiful.
You can find that is the point that I'm trying to make.
Absolutely. We love artists here. They're so talented and so cool. But I think that is going to take us to the end of our creative corner. I think
Greg
that's going to be all.
That's the name I was looking for. Sorry, Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder is another team.
That's a huge one. I was going to bring them up, Greg but Capullo's last name was stuck in my head. Scott Snyder too much every single episode.
It was stuck in my head, and I was like, "Oh my god, I need the last name. Why is it not coming to me right now?
Why is it not coming to me? We're talking about him so much on this.
We have. I brought him up on how many freaking podcasts and news and stuff, and I just sometimes,
Sometimes you just forget, and that's okay. But I thought I was going to come up with a clever transition, but I didn't. But that's all the time we have for this.
I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Jay, what are we going to be looking at next week for our polls?
So next week, our polls are going to be Green Arrow number 8, Titans Beast World number 5, Beast World Tour Star City, and Ghost Machine number 1.
That's got
we don't really know what's going on with Invasive,
on
so we'll kind of play things by ear and decide what we're doing on that front. But if you've heard us mentioning Invasive for like the last 3 weeks,
we want it to come out so bad.
I love Colin Budd's work so much. But anyway, I'll throw to you. I do not know. Katie is picking our back issue review for next week. You've teased me with the artist who has worked on the book, but I'll let you kind of throw the whole thing together here.
So I actually haven't read this graphic novel before, but I did read the short story that it was based on. It is called Rain. The original short story was Joe Hill, and I believe he has done a number of other comic projects as well with Hill House Comics from DC. Joe Hill and David Embure wrote this graphic novel adaptation of the short story, and the art is Zoe Thorogood, who I cannot sing enough praises for. I'm super excited to jump into it. It looks gorgeous. I have a fancy hardcover because I've been so excited about it since it came out. I'm thrilled for us to jump into it.
Okay, sounds good to me. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in any of our polls or in another creator corner, just tune in next week.
Yeah, and don't forget, join the conversation at Script Heroes Pod.
Yep. We'll see you then, Comic Geeks.
Let that settle a second.
That did come through.
That one did come through. It sounded more like a dying cat than a human playing Mario Kart, though.